He gave the alien girl a strange serum. Now she can't stop blushing. The research station floated in the darkness of space like a small metal island surrounded by an ocean of stars, and Dr. Ryan Cooper had been stationed there for almost 2 years, studying alien biology and trying to understand the species that humans had recently made contact with among the stars. The aliens were called the Volari, and they were a proud warrior race with pale blue skin that shimmered under certain lights, and eyes that glowed faintly in shades of amber and violet, and they stood taller than most humans with elegant features that seemed almost carved from living marble. Zara was one of the few Volari who volunteered to stay on the human research station, and she had been assigned to work with Ryan in the medical bay, and at first she had been cold and distant like most of her people, but over the months something had changed between them, and they had developed a cautious friendship built on mutual curiosity. Ryan had sandy brown hair that always seemed messy no matter how much he tried to fix it, and warm hazel eyes that Zara found strangely comforting, and he had a habit of talking to himself while he worked, which she found both amusing and endearing. One morning, Ryan was working on a new serum in the lab, and it was designed to help humans adapt to different atmospheric conditions on alien worlds, and the formula was complex, involving enzymes and proteins that could temporarily modify respiratory function. Zara entered the lab carrying data tablets, and her long silver hair flowed behind her like liquid moonlight, and she wore the standard research uniform, but somehow she made it look regal. Ryan barely looked up from his work, and he was muttering calculations under his breath while mixing compounds in a small vial, and the liquid inside shifted from clear to a soft golden color. "What are you creating now?" Zara asked, and her voice had a musical quality that always made Ryan pause. "Just a respiratory adaptation serum," Ryan replied, and he held up the vial to examine it against the light, and it should help humans breathe more easily on high carbon dioxide planets. Zara moved closer, and her natural curiosity overcoming her usual reserve, and she leaned in to look at the vial, and her face was just inches from Ryan's hand, trembled slightly at her proximity, and the vial slipped from his fingers, and time seemed to slow as it fell, and both of them reached for it at the same time, and their hands collided, and the vial shattered on the counter. The golden liquid splashed across the surface, and droplets flew into the air, and several landed on Zara's exposed arm and neck. Ryan grabbed a cloth immediately and began wiping the serum off her skin while apologizing profusely, and Zara stood very still, and her amber eyes were wide with surprise. "I am so sorry," Ryan said, and his face was flushed with embarrassment. "And are you okay? And does it burn? Or sting?" Zara shook her head slowly, and "No, it feels warm and strange but not painful." They both waited tensely for any adverse reaction, and Ryan kept checking her vital signs with a handheld scanner, and everything appeared normal, and after a few minutes they both relaxed. The incident seemed to be forgotten as they cleaned up the mess and continued their work for the rest of the day, and Zara helped Ryan reformulate the serum, and they worked side by side in comfortable silence. But the next morning everything changed. Zara arrived at the lab, and the moment she saw Ryan, her pale blue skin flushed with a deep violet color that spread across her cheeks and down her neck, and she stopped in the doorway, and her eyes went wide with shock. Ryan looked up from his terminal and "Good morning, Zara," and he smiled his usual friendly smile. Zara's flush deepened to an almost purple hue, and she pressed her hands to her cheeks. "And good morning," she managed to say, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Are you feeling all right?" Ryan asked, and he stood up with concern on his face. "And you look different." "I do not know," Zara said, and she turned away from him, and the flush was spreading to her ears and the back of her neck. "And something is wrong with me." Ryan grabbed his scanner and ran a full diagnostic, and her vitals were all elevated, and heart rate increased, and body temperature up by 2 degrees, and hormonal levels showing unusual spikes. "When did this start?" he asked. "This morning," Zara said, and she still would not look at him directly. "And when I saw you," Ryan's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn, "in the serum from yesterday, and it must have affected you somehow. But it was designed for human respiratory systems." Zara protested. "I know," Ryan said, and he was already pulling up his research notes on the terminal, "But alien biology is different, and maybe some component reacted with your biochemistry in an unexpected way." Over the next few hours, Ryan ran every test he could think of, and what he discovered both fascinated and horrified him. and the serum had somehow altered Zara's neurochemistry, and specifically the parts of her brain that regulated emotional response and physical reactions to certain stimuli, and the trigger appeared to be Ryan himself. Whenever Zara looked at him or heard his voice or even thought about him, her body would flood with a chemical response that caused the intense blushing and elevated heart rate and increased body temperature. It is like an allergic reaction, Ryan explained, but instead of histamines, your body is producing excess amounts of a compound similar to human oxytocin, mixed with adrenaline. Can you fix it? Zara asked, and her voice was small and she was sitting on the examination table with her face turned away from him. I will find a way, Ryan promised, and I just need time to analyze the serum's interaction with your biology. Days passed and Ryan worked tirelessly to find a cure, and Zara tried to continue her normal duties, but it was nearly impossible. And every time she encountered Ryan, her body betrayed her with that deep violet flush, and her people did not blush naturally. So the reaction was extremely noticeable to everyone on the station. The other, Falari, began to whisper, and blushing was considered a sign of extreme emotion in their culture, and something that warriors learned to control from childhood, and seeing Zara so affected was shocking to them. The human crew members were more sympathetic, but equally curious, and rumors spread quickly through the small station. Zara began avoiding Ryan as much as possible, and she would take different routes through the station and eat her meals at odd hours and volunteer for tasks that kept her far from the medical bay. But Ryan needed her help to find the cure, and he needed to run tests and take samples and monitor her reactions. Please, Zara, he said one evening when he finally cornered her in one of the observation decks, and I cannot help you if you keep avoiding me. Zara kept her back to him and staring out at the stars, and this is humiliating, she said quietly. And my people value emotional control above almost everything, and I have become a spectacle. Ryan felt a pang of guilt, and I am so sorry. And this is all my fault. It was an accident, Zara said. But that does not make it easier to bear. Ryan moved to stand beside her and, careful to leave some distance between them, and talk to me, he said gently, and help me understand what you are feeling. Zara's flush deepened, but she did not run this time. And it is not just the physical reaction, she said slowly. And the serum has done something to my thoughts as well. And I cannot stop thinking about you. And when we are apart, I find myself wanting to seek you out, and when we are together my heart races and I feel both happy and terrified at the same time. Ryan listened carefully. And that sounds like the neurochemical changes affecting your emotional centers. Is that all it is? Zara asked, and she finally turned to look at him, and her glowing amber eyes met his, and just chemicals. Ryan opened his mouth to give a scientific answer, but the words died in his throat. And he had been so focused on finding a cure that he had not stopped to examine his own feelings, and the truth was, he had grown to care for Zara deeply, and her intelligence and her dry humor, and the way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. The serum altered your brain chemistry, he said carefully, but emotions are always just chemistry in a way, and that does not make them less real. So what I am feeling, Zara began, might be artificially enhanced, Ryan finished, but that does not mean the foundation was not already there. They stood in silence for a long moment, and the stars wheeled slowly beyond the observation window. I need to tell you something, Ryan said, and even before the accident I found myself looking forward to seeing you every day, and I would make excuses to work late just because you were still in the lab, and I told myself it was just friendship, but Zara whispered. But I think I was lying to myself. Ryan said. Zara's flush changed quality somehow and becoming softer and warmer. And what are you saying? I am saying that I care about you, Ryan said, and I hate that my mistake caused this, but I also cannot help feeling grateful that it gave you the courage to tell me how you feel. And even if those feelings are chemically influenced. Zara stepped closer to him, and her hand reached out tentatively, and Ryan took it gently, and her skin was warm and smooth. If you fix the serum's effects, she said, and will these feelings go away? I do not know, Ryan admitted, and they might fade, or they might have just been amplified, and the only way to know is to cure you and let you decide how you truly feel. And if I do not want to be cured yet? Zara asked. Ryan looked at her in surprise. And the medical ethics, I know, Zara said, but perhaps we could take A few more days and I want to understand these feelings before they are taken away. And I want to know if what I feel is only the serum, or something more. Ryan knew he should refuse, and he should cure her Ameti.